ASEAN People Speak, Season 3. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our fourth episode, we will be joined by a distinguished expert and researcher in the area of artificial intelligence governance and digital rights. Our guest speaker has also focused her studies and research in areas of sustainable development, human rights, and digital communication. She is currently a senior research associate at Kazana Research Institute in Malaysia. Her current research interests include digital rights and AI governance in the context of Southeast Asia and Malaysia. She has also worked in the areas of environment and climate policy, social and solidarity economy, as well as sustainable development in general. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our speaker for the fourth episode, Dr. June E. Tan. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Dr. June E. How are you?
Good. Good
How
evening.
is Malaysia so
Raining
far?
here. It's raining. As how I understand, Manila is also raining.
Yes, from where I'm from, Manila is also having a wet season or a rainy season now. So it's a bit cold as well because it's the Burr months. But I hope you're also doing well there in Malaysia.
Yep. I'm doing pretty well.
All right. So I guess to start off our podcast for tonight or for today, I would like to ask you, with the rise of artificial intelligence in ASEAN, can you tell us, Dr. Junli, how does it actually put environmental rights at risk?
Okay, so I guess just to start off, we would have to mention the environmental impacts of AI. And of course, that includes the entire value chain from the mining of the raw materials needed to build the chips and the infrastructure and the technology to energy that you need to run data centers, energy to power devices and sensors for IoT, and energy to train AI models. and that tends to be very energy intensive, which we're concerned about when we talk about climate change, for instance. And then, of course, you have the e-waste side. So I just want to make sure that we don't see AI as something that's very, abstract and out there, but
Yes,
it actually
actually,
has.
I was actually going to ask that people might not be able to relate AI with in the environment. So thank you for sharing with us to start off our conversation. So
Mhm.
we actually usually associate AI with computers or digital age and the use of internet or cyberspace, but I appreciate now that you have actually mentioned the environment and where it comes from, or the start of everything, because this involves a lot of raw materials that is coming from the earth
Yeah.
and is part of our environment. And this definitely has an impact, not just to the people using them or working on them, but to the environment in general. So with that, Dr. June E, can you tell us then, how do we actually put artificial intelligence, its rise and development, how do we put the environment at risk because of that?
Yeah, so of course that was the what I was saying on the environmental impacts, right? Of actually having to run to build the technology, to run the technology, to maintain it, and all of that. And I also wanted to point out, I guess, what kind of AI technology are we talking about? Like we can be talking about all sorts because AI is very broad. So it includes, for instance, facial recognition. It includes like traffic navigation. It includes, of course, ChatGPT. So, as in large language models, as like ChatGPT, and who are benefiting from these technologies and so-called like consuming our collective carbon quota, right? If we only have some, for our collective sustainable development, if large language models, for instance, consume a lot of energy to train, and who is really generating profit from that, and what are large language models good for instance. So what I wanted to do is just to contextualize, not only does it have the environmental impact, but also is it equitable of who is extracting value from these AI
Mm.
technologies. Because when you look at carbon quota, for instance, right, not borrowing from the future to develop now, the whole definition of sustainable development, really, that you're borrowing from the future, you're borrowing from other people to grow. We really need to consider if it's equitable in terms of how much energy AI technologies use and who are actually benefiting from the use of our resources.
Now that you have mentioned the concept of equitability and who are benefiting, I'd like to focus the discussion more on the emergence now of artificial intelligence technology and the potential it can give to accelerate ASEAN's overall sustainable development goals progress, particularly areas related to the environmental development. What do you think are the existing weaknesses and challenges within ASEAN that impact the state's ability to reap the benefits of artificial intelligence in relation to environmental rights? You've mentioned a while ago about who benefits with this technology or these developments. You've also talked about carbon print data. Maybe you could elaborate on those things?
So, one thing is maybe to start off by talking about the potential uses of the technology, right? On how it can possibly help with improving our environment. Even though I would, of course, as always, try to push back against the assumption that technology will get us out of this mess that we're in. So, that is something that I don't actually completely stand for. But in any case, there are potential uses of the technology for things like environmental surveillance, for things like land use or illegal poaching. There's a fair bit of use cases on energy efficiency, for instance, and then monitoring of environmental quality, of having early warning systems for climate change adaptation and things like that. So those are potential uses of the technology, for one, right? So the other part of the question, I guess, is if we're able to reap the benefits of such uses of these technologies. So, from what I've done research on AI governance and AI adoption in the region in Southeast Asia, there are a few challenges that we're gonna have to face before we can reap the benefits. For one, of course, we have to talk about the digital divide. So you have countries like, one country, which is Singapore, which is on the top tier, who's quite advanced in its governance and use of AI. And then you have Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and a couple of other countries who are kind of like mid-tier, who are kind of we have access to internet that is quite widespread. For instance, people are sufficiently digitally savvy. And then you have the third tier, which are countries, say Laos, Cambodia, Timor-Leste, for instance, and all that, who are still struggling with digitalization, right? So definitely the development in terms of how quickly we're able to expand on the use of AI is going to be uneven, for sure. Right, so this digitalization level is not even AI yet. And then other challenges, the government's capacities, for instance, on whether they're able to see the potential of the technology and use it, properly is a question. And then there's the problem of whether we have quality data, because you have to remember, right, that if we use machines to learn, like machine learning, which is AI, that is most currently popular or widely in use, is using machine learning. And that requires a lot of data as to be able to train the machines to then generate predictions and decisions, right, outputs. So if you don't have very good data, let's say on land use, then your ability to, for instance, use machine learning to
to create an output.
Yeah, to highlight which are the more sensitive, more vulnerable areas for land
Yes.
use would be actually limited. Or similarly, if you don't have data on where illegal poaching happens, then it'll be difficult to data is fairly important. And that's something that, as a region, apart from, as I mentioned, a few countries here and there, we're just not having that much data.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I picked out what you mentioned a while ago, digital divide. You've mentioned Singapore, for example, as the only country. I mean, you singled that country out because of its advances in terms of digitalization. It's really quite far from different countries. And then you have the second tier and the third tier countries that are experiencing certain developments in digitalization, but not as good as Singapore. And you've mentioned the development of digitalization has a direct impact or a direct effect on not just the data, but the output as well. And when you mentioned about these countries, I mean, from the top tier to the third tier or to the other tiers rather, I would like us to discuss more about this digital divide that you have mentioned because the advancements create significant differences in the output of machines or models that are used. But can you tell us, other than this output in terms of digitalization, how can you say that it's still a long way for other countries?
So I mean, there are in indices like to actually measure, like the researchers out there have measured, for instance, whether governments are AI ready or not. So there's actually one index, I think is called Government AI Readiness Index. So that will give you some indication of where things are and who is where in terms of ranking. But I guess maybe to just give an overall kind of conceptualization of what
Mm-hmm.
is needed, for instance, to have to develop AI, right? So the key ingredients that you would need to have a very vibrant AI ecosystem and be able to really reap the benefits of the technologies would be one is that you will need to have access to compute power, and that is like
Mm-hmm.
lots of chips, graphic like GPUs, and that those are expensive these days and high in demand. So you need to have access to that, and then you need to have access to quality data, as we have mentioned. You need to have a lot of talent, like a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
who know, what we're doing with
Yes.
technology, and then supportive government policies and things like that to have like a whole ecosystem going on. So far within the region, Singapore really is the one who's doing it properly, and having also at least some thinking behind how to guide the nation in
Mm.
moving towards a safer and more responsible AI, which is something that has been talked about quite a fair bit. Whereas like all our other countries are more at the, oh, we need to adopt the technology, we need to not lose the AI race without really understanding what we're
Mm.
in for, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and I had another point which I have forgotten. Never mind, it will come back.
Okay. But I would like to point out, or I'm picking up from what you said a while ago, that Singapore is a country that, based on what you mentioned a while ago, it initiates, generates, and creates certain things when it comes to artificial intelligence. However, the other countries, I mean, that's a good point that you mentioned, that the other countries are trying to adopt, or somehow, since they have that thinking that I don't want to lose or be behind the AI race. That's why I'm trying to do these things. However, what gets compromised is the planning, and it deals basically on governance and policies. So instead of being able to lead a clear or a straight path, somehow it usually just adopts what the other or the leading country is doing, and then it will just follow. So, as a researcher, is there supposed to be a paradigm shift when it comes to those things? Or is there a way for the other countries that instead of keeping up with the advancements, they are able to do the planning properly on their own and at the same time fit in their own climate or in their own economy and based probably on the resources that they have in their own state.
Yeah, so I think that right now there is like a wave of interest in regulating AI and trying to push for more responsible and more trustworthy AI and all of that, right? And this, of course, has been happening at countries like, say, in the EU, in China, in the US, UK, and like more advanced than the region countries that are more advanced than most of our countries in ASEAN or Southeast Asia. And we kind of need to be able to see more clearly where we're at, which
Mhm.
is ultimately speaking, I think most of us within the region will be users of AI and not so much the producers.
Mm.
So But of course, users of AI will still have the responsibility, right, of
Yes.
using it responsibly. So I think that this is also part of the research that I'm doing right now. I haven't got any findings per se yet, but it's something that I'm quite concerned about, of how to look at the problem of AI governance from the perspective of smaller countries like us in Southeast Asia, where we don't have that much bargaining power, but we would still like to see some way of using and adopting AI safely. Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit further away from the environmental
Yes, yes.
stuff.
But well, going back to the environment as well,
Yeah,
since you've mentioned it already, how can developing countries then make use of AI advantages in terms of environmental protections, despite the still continuously widening of digital divide?
the thing is, I don't think that most of our problems is technological, if you know
Mm,
what I mean. If you have people who are polluting the rivers, or cutting down forests and things like that, those people are the ones that you have to deal with. Slapping technology on it will not change anything, right?
yes.
So I think that we have to be very clear about what technology can and cannot do.
Mhm.
So if we're very clear that, okay, the problem here is monitoring, let's say, of a certain forest, or the problem here is wastefulness in terms of energy usage, then we can zero it down and say, okay, let's put in sensors so that we can then calculate, what would be the optimal usage of energy at all times of the day, and all of that. So there is place for technology. Um,
Mm.
for those sorts of problems. But before we hurry into implementing technology into all problems, I think we have to really sit down and think about the problems first, and whether technology is the best, thing to deal with it. Like, if you have a corruption problem, you have a corruption problem. So
Yes, yes.
it's
And there's a whole lot of web or connection to different
exactly.
other things. And I want to delve deeper into what you said, that it's does it necessarily have to be technology that answers certain environmental problems or certain things? And I recognize that it's all connected. I mean, technology is not the only solution, or AI is not the only solution, because there are other factors as well. There are economic factors, there are other factors. But since we're talking about these problems already and how it relates to the environment, I would like to ask you now, and this also relates to you mentioning a while ago that there are a lot of things involved, like not just corruption, but probably also the issue on poverty or food and energy and all other things. But
Yep.
can you tell us the role which civil society can play for strategic participation in the development of AI governance as it relates to sustainability and climate change? I know somehow people cannot relate it right away, but as a researcher, I would like to know, how can civil society, private persons, or an ordinary person play a strategic participation in this change or in this kind of development of AI?
So I would say, and I've always given very similar advice, actually, on how civil society can participate. I think one very, very important thing to do is to build alliances, build partnerships, because of how technical, one thing is how technical the technology side is, and how technical, for that matter, that the environmental sector also is, right? That
Yes.
you don't have enough of experts to spread around, that everybody gets their own expert. That it would probably be the better use of all our talents to band together and to find, common interests. And I think that you can consider this from many different kind of angles. So one is to bridge disciplines, right? So the environmental discipline, technological side. The other way is to bridge, for instance, the local and the international. So being able to form this channel of information that moves information from what's happening at the grassroots to
Mm.
policymaking circles, up in international fora, in the UN, and things like that. So I think a lot of that sort of community building and movement building has to happen to link all of these different players together to be effective, because otherwise we're gonna have to do a lot of double work.
Yes. And I
So
think,
the other side of it really, when I talk about work as a researcher, I think about research as work,
mm-hmm,
right? So
yes.
the other role that civil society could play, I think, is really to gather more evidence as
Mhm.
to what is happening in the intersection between environment and technology. So, I mean, of course, there are many different intersections on, for instance, environmental impacts of technology, or even surveillance on environmental activists, for instance, as another possible interaction, and gather those evidence so that when you do get a forum, when you do build those partnerships, you're gonna have something to say, right? To say,
Yes. There's
we,
something, there's some proof,
yeah,
or there is some data to back it up. Yes.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So that would be what I would think has to be done.
Yes. And I actually also want to echo on that, building alliances and gathering evidence. It's good that you mentioned about grassroots and then slowly going up to the international fora, but that has to have evidence or some proof. And the only way to do it also is through civil society participation, when people gather and build alliances so that solutions could be more concrete.
Yep,
And it's not going to be just based on policies that are loosely based on theoretical, but more on what the effect will be on the environment because of the evidence and the proof gathered by civil society.
yep.
Well, on that note, Dr. June E, maybe just a few things before we wrap up our episode. What can you tell our listeners or those who are viewing us right now, maybe to sum up everything that we have talked about with regard to the rise of artificial intelligence and how it relates to environmental rights?
So I would like to bring up a point that I have in my notes, which I haven't
Mm-hmm,
addressed yet,
mm-hmm,
which is connected on how AI affects environmental rights, which is the attention economy, right? That's
mm-hmm.
all the time that you have been spending on social media and consuming news and entertainment and all of that for many waking hours. I think that we have to make sure that we don't succumb to information overload and attention spans that are really short, because that will really make it harder for us to build and sustain movements within an environment of noise. So how does that relate to AI? I mean, of course you would know, but maybe for the benefit of our audiences as well, on how, for instance, content is served to you on social media is using AI basically, right? On
Yes.
recommending systems. So those recommendation systems are optimizing content to get your attention.
Yes. Or
So
the ones that, I mean, somehow from what I understand in my basic knowledge, is that it's based on the behavior or the swiping or how much time you give
yep,
into, like, for example, a certain article, advertisement, or something that
exactly.
would see the
Yep,
algorithm that goes into what the reader or the user
yep.
is focusing its his or her attention to.
Yep, exactly. And social media is designed to be addictive. So, and I know that environmental activists have to be on social media because that's where your audience is. You need to reach out to those people and all of that. But it's also important to be vigilant that we
Mm.
need to guard our attention and avoid burning out because we have a lot of work to do on the ground. And, let's take a break once in a while from social media and doom scrolling. Yep.
That's very nice. Actually, that's a very, on that note, that's a very nice way to close our episode today, because we actually have our guest speakers also who mentioned about people who are so into cyberspace, artificial intelligence, social media in particular, that this actually relates now to fake news or other topics that already consume the human being or the attention of the user or the consumer, that it actually has an effect already on the individual, and that
Yes.
necessarily
And
relates
your
to the
mental health
individual.
as well.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
the
So
person to
you
his
have to protect your
community.
mental health. Yeah. In order to be able to fight. So that's there's that.
Yes. Thank you for that. And it's a beautiful way to actually close our our episode for today. And I would like to pick up also on what you said, that the attention economy, what you mentioned a while ago, attention economy and the effect of having to stay in social media and entertainment and its impact on the user or the consumers when it comes to getting information, and necessarily affects not just the person, but the person how he or she relates also to others, so the community, and then the community for to a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger
Sphere of
sphere.
influence.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, bigger and bigger sphere. So thank you so much for that, Dr. June E. We really appreciate all your insights for tonight, for today's episode. And I think that's all for today. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Dr. June E, for joining us today. Would you like to promote any of your websites, organizations, publications, or any upcoming projects that you would like to share with us?
So I am not active on social media, but I would like to actually maybe give a link, or maybe a couple of links in the underneath this video, for instance.
Yes.
One is a short article on societal risks of AI,
Mm.
which would be possibly interesting for those who are interested in understanding how AI affects relations within society, relations and relationships within society, beyond individuals. So I think possibly an interesting read. And also another article that I wrote like about 2 3 years back on AI governance in Southeast Asia. So which is where I think you'll find information on where the region is or was really during that time, and what AI governance means, and what challenges we face, and what are the recommendations for the region as well. So I'll give you those links.
So thank you so much, Dr. Junie, for your time. And
Thanks.
join us again next week. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WG ASEAN HRMEC. And you can also visit our website at ASEANHRMEC.org. Until next time, guys, thank you so much. Stay informed and stay engaged. Goodbye.